Horror Western, a genre I am a huge fan of. However, I've never read a novel in the genre until now. So if you have other recommendations out there, let me know down in the comments. But film-wise, I've seen plenty of films in the genre, my favorite being Ravenous, starring Guy Pearce, which actually has some striking similarities to this book in such a way that I believe that Tim Curran, the author of Skin Medicine, the book I'm going to talk about today, it feels like an homage, but almost feels like plagiarism, but that could be due to just the subject matter, let's say. I don't want to get into spoilers, but there is some Native American folklore in this book. There's also Native American folklore that deals with very similar subject matter in Ravenous. Anyway, if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. But before we get any further, thank you guys out there for submitting this book. The Falcon Reads out there. Carol Wainwright actually is the one who submitted the book. The rest of you guys voted on me to read this book in the monthly poll. And while I appreciate the suggestion, I always appreciate your suggestions, this book was a difficult read, and I'm going to get into it. But before we get into it, let's talk about the hook. What is Skin Medicine by Tim Curran about? Tyler Cabe, Civil War veteran turned bounty hunter, has come to the town of Whisper Lake looking for a killer. But what he finds is much, much worse. So what did I think? Well, let us begin with character. Now this book, there's a lot of characters. There's just not a lot of characterization, unfortunately. You guys know, if you've been watching this channel long enough, I am a character first reader. That's what gets me into the story, which is the first reason why this book was a difficult read for me, is that when you can't get behind somebody and you can't follow their trials and their tribulations and see their flaws and maybe why thematically they are the character that the author chose to explore the story through and all of the events, it's difficult just for me to kind of get invested, to be immersed in a story. There are other ways that I can be immersed in a story, like atmosphere or something like that. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this book, it felt like Deadwood a little bit, right, in the beginning. It felt like the author was trying to create this authentically Western setting, which I believe he achieved. So I will give him credit in that regard, in that it felt like a very real, a very detailed, a very vibrant place, full of a diverse set of characters. However, we never get deep into these characters' heads, not even the protagonist, if you want to call him that. I guess he's a protagonist. He doesn't show up until the second part of the book, whereas the first part of the book is kind of setting the stage, but I'll talk about that more in the plot. Tyler Cabe, let's start with him. He's our protagonist. If you want to label one of these characters a protagonist, he's a Civil War veteran. He is now a bounty hunter, as I mentioned. He's looking for this killer. And he shows up to this town, and he meets the people, and he even meets someone from his past, a man named Jackson Durker, who is the sheriff. And the interesting thing here, from a character standpoint, is that they both served in the Civil War. So they're both veterans, but they served on opposing sides. So here you go. We have some built-in conflict. Even though the war is over, we know those things are still brewing inside them. And so that is really the only piece of characterization in this entire novel, the entire damn novel, where you have these two characters. There's embedded conflict. They have a history with each other. They kind of explore these differences, throughout the narrative itself. And we get to see them try to suppress these conflicting desires, but also see them manifest on the page. But unfortunately, the saddest thing about this book is their character arc. So yes, they do have a character arc. Why I call it sad is that, so this book is told in the omniscient voice, which I'm not a huge fan of. It is what it is. It's fine. But that allows the author to insert his authorial voice onto the page, right? To tell us certain things. And that's exactly what he does. At the very end of this book, he says, and so Cabe and Durker came full circle. Ta-da. Now, that's not how you do a character arc. In my opinion, at least that's not what I enjoy about character arcs. I enjoy it when you can feel a character arc, when you can follow the journeys of these characters, these opposing forces, and or not, right? But you can see them grow as people. You can see them fail, succeed, learn. Don't just tell me that you made a character arc on the page, okay? So unfortunately, this is about as deep as you get into character in anywhere in this entire novel. And it's so weird because Tim Curran, he creates a vivid cast of characters. So characterization is more than the amount of characters. It's more about how unique each one of these characters are. It's about their interplay, right? It's about what makes them tick. What are their flaws? What are they trying to explore thematically? Not directly, but what is the author trying to explore thematically with these characters? Why them? Why now? And you don't get that. You never get that. And again, maybe that's not Tim Curran's intention with this book, because it does feel like kind of a B-movie Western, horror Western, if you want to call it that. And well, I think you can do something like that, and it's fine. Of course, any author can make any decision they want to make, but it was really hard for me to get through this book because of that, because I was never behind these characters. I was never, and also I was never enticed by something else like atmosphere or a compelling plot, which I'm going to talk about next. And so you have a lot of characters, you have a lot of characters interacting with each other, but you don't have that depth. You don't have these quote unquote full circle moments, with the exception of Cabe and Durker, when it didn't feel earned, you know? It didn't feel earned to me. It just felt like he set up the pieces and he completed this circle. You know, he connected the dots basically at the most rudimentary level, and then told us, he said, ta-da, look, and everything came full circle. So unfortunately, yeah, characterization is extremely slim in this, if not non-existent whatsoever. Needless to say, it was a very difficult read for me, being a character-forward reader. But let's talk about plot. So the plot is, it's weird. So this book is just under 300 pages. I believe it's like 260-ish pages, something like that. It felt really long. Why did it feel really long? Well, the book is broken up into 4 parts. The first part is setting the stage. So we don't even get to meet the protagonist, if you want to call him that, until the second part. And it's kind of cool in a B movie sort of way. So maybe that's what I need to really kind of wrap my head around or accept, is that Tim Curran wasn't trying to create anything meaningful or compelling in a characterization standpoint. He was just trying to create a good time. And I guess maybe if you like the subtleties of scene setting, of setting, like I felt like he created an interesting Western setting with a lot of, you know, historical detail, a lot of just detail, let's say. So if you're a fan of extremely developed setting that feels, anyway, I'm no historian, but it feels kind of historically accurate to a degree, then I think you're going to get something out of this. But anyway, back to the plot. So the second part is when we are introduced to Tyler Cabe. He comes in, he starts meeting everybody, and it's a slow burn. It's an extremely slow burn, and then we get some crazy violence happening elsewhere with these characters called the Hide Hunters. Yes, you heard that correctly, the Hide Hunters. And they're these bloodthirsty, mutilating werewolves, kind of. They're werewolves, and they talk, though. They're talking werewolves, which kind of killed it for me too. So they're not the kind of werewolves that become beastly and animalistic once they change, and the man is completely stripped away from the psyche, and then only to. The thing I love about werewolves, and I know I'm kind of going off tangents here, is that it's the psyche of a man trapped in a beast, and then but the man is out of control, right? And the beast manifests and then does terrible things, and then the man or woman, could be a woman, of course, is stuck with the knowledge that he or she created these partook in these atrocities. You don't have that here at all. And again, it could have been a cool part of characterization. I don't know where I'm going with this. There's a lot of gore. There's not a lot of horror. I have a big problem with that. Being a huge horror fan myself, I love horror. I think it's an art. I think very few writers out there can create horror to a successful degree. Tim Curran did not create horror whatsoever for me in this entire book. It's all about gore, and gore is not scary. Gore is disgusting, sure, of course, and I don't mind gore. I'm not against gore. But it is not horror. Gore is not horror. That's what I was hoping for with this book. I was hoping that the gore would be utilized in such a way, an effective way, to convey horror, right? Used in the right moments, used in the right proportions, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's something else that can be said about the plot here, too, is that It didn't feel like Tim Curran was orchestrating much of anything when it comes to pacing and reveals. It's just kind of stuff happens and you're there along for the ride. You don't really care because you're never invested in any of these characters, like I said. But after part 1 and part 2, we are introduced to part 3. And the entirety of part 3 is the origin story of the villain. Weird, right? So we do meet the villain at the very beginning. We don't know it's the villain or the antagonistic force until later, but yeah, we get an entire backstory, and I'm talking like before he's born backstory. So we learn about who his mother was and how he came into this world, and the terrible things he did, and basically why he is what he is, you know. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all, right? It's a lot of details. It's an interesting character study in that it almost feels like a character sketch, like Tim Curran trying to figure out, okay, who's my antagonist? I want to really flesh this guy out, create everything. I want to know him from the moment he was birthed into this world until the man he is now. And he does that, but again, he does it with a lot of gore. He does it with a lot of detail, you know, a lot of expository detail that just, they're interesting parts, okay? There are interesting parts, but overall, it's like you dedicated you put the entire damn plot on pause to talk about this character for, it had to have been at least 50 pages, okay? At least. And I don't know how you guys like to read books out there, but I like to read books where the proportions are not, you know, you're kind of like dripping characterization and plot, and you're seeing these things intertwine and reveal over time. It's not just like segmenting a story into 3 or 4 or 5 or however many pieces you want and then just telling us all this stuff. Really weird thing to do, to put the entire plot on pause to just tell the backstory of the antagonist, which brings us to part 4. Part 4 is, you know, it's the climax. It's the final showdown. It's when the antagonist and the protagonist come together, good versus evil, if you want to call it that, and it's whatever, man. It's whatever. I really can't say anything positive about this book other than perhaps the writing, which we'll talk about right now. The writing itself, or as I like to call it, the cinematography of the novel, as you know, it's an omniscient, and like I already said, I'm not a huge fan, but it's fine, okay? It's fine. It feels more like a fairy tale kind of telling. Because I think other authors can do omniscient great. Cormac McCarthy's one. It never feels like a godlike voice kind of telling the story when McCarthy writes, but, you know, I'm getting off topic. So the writing, I felt like Tim Curran, he created this kind of Western style language, which was great. I think that's one really difficult thing to do, is when you're writing something from a particular time period, to capture the voices, not just in the dialogue itself, but in the actual narrative, the narration. And he does it. He does it great here. And I'm really torn between, sometimes it's a little bit self-indulgent, and sometimes it being like great, right? Authentic. Because I am no Western scholar by a long shot. But, you know, like I've written Western stories before, short stories, and it's really fun to write in that voice and that style and that time period. But, you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm turning it into a caricature of itself. I'm not sure. And at times it does feel kind of like a caricature. But I would say overall, that is the best quality of this book, is the writing, is the line-by-line stuff. From an artistic standpoint. I don't want to say from a standpoint that gets you into the characters, that gets you into the plot. Nothing of that sort. But if you like a good Westernly, if not sometimes a little self-indulgent string of prose, then you're going to find something to like here. Which is why I'm going to give Skin Medicine by Tim Curran a 5 out of 10. A story full of characters but light on characterization, with a plot that meanders often and also comes to a complete halt to tell the backstory of the antagonist, using buckets of blood in lieu of genuine horror, but writing that is pretty damn good most of the time on a line-by-line level, if not a little self-indulgent. So I'm sorry to say, guys out there who voted on this book, who wanted me to read it, who, you know, I'm assuming you guys enjoyed it. I just didn't enjoy this one. I wanted to love this one. I remember reading the first opening lines, kind of getting a little excited, and then being very confused after the first little chapter or two, because, you know, you got that feeling in the pit of your stomach where something's not quite right. Something's not quite going to deliver how you think it might deliver. But anyway, it's an average book at best, but Come at me in the comments, argue your points. I would love to hear it. Maybe I missed something, but I always appreciate the recommendations. I will always read the books you guys and review the books you guys vote on and request. So hopefully this wasn't too much of a disappointment for you. And hopefully I articulated the reasons as to why it's just not for me. But if you'd like to check out my own work, my own novels that may or may not be above average, check out the Amazon links in the description. And thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.